Welcome to the What's Your Deal podcast, where we discuss business acquisitions, investments, management, and exit strategies. I'm your host, Matt Uhler. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of What's Your Deal. If you joined us for part one of the assisted living facility episode, there was some heavy stuff there and a whole lot of detail. But part two is a much brighter day. And so in this episode, we're going to go through the aspects of that business transaction that started to get better and actually ended up turning out very, very favorable. And actually what we all intended when we first started in that business acquisition. If you remember, at this episode, I am a guest and my business partner, Sarah Rainwater, is the host. So Sarah, welcome back.
Happy to be here again. I'm happy to talk about this one because you're right. Part one was a little bit on the heavy side. We covered it. This all went down at a kind of a heavy time. It was So to kind of recap, you had acquired this business in September of 2019, and we all know what happened in the early months of 2020. And it wasn't only that hurdle, but there was other hurdles, and we'll recap it. But I'm anxious to get to the part where you can kind of tell us, or we can discuss, how this ended up being a success.
Yeah, and I think one of the principles that is important in this, and again, in part one and in part two, we're talking about the fundamental principles that I feel so strongly about in small business and in partnerships, and why I feel so strongly about them. Mm-hmm. And one of the principles that leads us to part two is having the staying power, right? If you cannot continue to play the game of business, it's game over, lights out. And in this situation, fortunately, through lots of luck, tenacity, team effort on everybody's part, we were able to get and continue to play the game to get to the brighter days ahead. And so, yes, part two should be a whole lot more fun than part one.
Well, so let's recap. So
Yes.
Everything about this deal, when you were looking at it, checked out. It was a great business to purchase. It had longevity. It had established financials. It checked all your boxes.
It did.
Which is why you got together a team of partnerships and went through purchasing it. Shortly after purchasing, just to recap all the fun elements,
Yes.
COVID hit, which being a assisted living facility, you had mentioned that you guys kept the facility infection-free for quite a long time, but it was inevitable that it was going to hit and have the impact that it did. Shortly after acquisition, you had your operating partner, who was an owner in the business, leave, which was probably, would you say, was one of, if not the greatest blow? I mean, definitely up there.
Well, as I shared, there were aspects of her in that role that weren't ideal. And so had I known what was coming, I might have done things differently. Mm-hmm. So it was a factor that combined with COVID led to some very, very significant issues for me as what is supposed to be a semi-absentee owner. Mm-hmm. That was really a big factor. Had we had an operating partner who was an owner all through COVID, it would have been a totally different story.
So you, to touch on that subject, you went from being what you thought would be a pretty much absentee owner.
That's correct.
To, I mean, you had boots on the ground way more than you anticipated to keep this thing afloat.
Yeah, and let me just dive into that for a little bit. So when people think of absentee ownership, that's actually in my partnerships what my partners typically are, right? They get a report once a month. They get updated if there's something they need to know once a month. But otherwise, they're not involved in making decisions or involved in the day-to-day operations. Myself, as a managing partner of the entity, I'm responsible to my partner. So I'm not absentee,
Correct.
But I am certainly semi-absentee, meaning it's, I'm having a meeting or two a month, a phone call here and there to help steer the ship and make important decisions, but nothing even remotely like the activity and the direct impact on ownership management that I had in this transaction.
Well, when the operating partner left, who was supposed to be the manager there, staff has to know what to do. I mean, I know there was some experience in the staff that they did, to some point know what to do, but there has to be some guidance.
Yeah, and I want to use the term leadership because as we walk through this episode and I replaced the operating partner with another owner operator who's a partner, really the term that comes to mind is leadership.
Correct.
And even though myself and my associate who were managing partners were trying to provide all the leadership we could, we were not boots on the ground on a regular basis enough to provide the leadership that this business needed to thrive again.
Well, and I mean, and I know that because of our, other business partnerships. We have partnerships where in one business, I am the leader and I have managers in place and they report to me. And then, I work with you when there's things that need to be worked on. But you're not the person in that particular business that is, helping lead these employees. And so that is such an important aspect of the business. If you're going to purchase a business, unless you're going to structure it to have a team and be one of the truly absentee owners, like you were talking about, some of your partners who are just investors are, you have to be involved in some sort of capacity from day one.
And this is part of the reason I think this is so important is because, as you know, we're getting lots of people in our audience that are asking about buying businesses that are located a long different distance away from them, or they just want to be absentee or semi-absentee or whatever. And these are the distinctions. And this is the reason why, depending on that person's skill set, I don't recommend it. Is because in your example, I went from being somebody who was the direct contact for my managing partner to being the direct contact for almost all of the staff, including the management staff. And again, that's not absentee ownership.
Right. And
had my life not allowed me to step into that role, this business wouldn't be here either.
Right. And this is, if we're going to talk risk management, this is a risk that you also know could potentially happen. And that's one of the tools that we're really trying to give our audience is it's not saying that this inevitably is going to happen, but make wise decisions knowing that it could potentially happen because it has and it very well might.
Right. It's all of the what ifs.
Yeah.
So as we talked about in episode 1, part 1, where so many people enter these business opportunities and in dynamics like this with rose-colored glasses, and they're focused on all of the great things that might come. And being willing to take a minute and say, okay, well, what if this happens or what if that happens? Are you ready?
Right.
And that's in my opinion, that's a great place to make a financial investment in a business is with the entire scope of what's in front of you potentially on the plate, as opposed to just all of the great ideas and anticipation for what's going to be fabulous.
Right. And we have produced content that goes over finding the right business for you, not just necessarily finding the right business that looks great on paper, because this business looked great on paper.
It did.
It did. It checked all the boxes, looked great. And refresh my memory, but there was direct industry experience here as well.
Absolutely.
Which made the difference.
It did.
Right? So we have the assets of finding the right business for you, or even like our business guardrails worksheet, where we ask the uncomfortable questions. How far are you willing to travel from your home and how many times a week? Well, if you mark down, I'm not willing to travel away from my home. Well, what happens when you turn into Matt, who is digging ditches, trying to find a water leak, and as soon as he fixes it, and listen to part 1, but as soon as you fix it, another one springs up. So you went from, and you live an hour and 15 minutes away from this business, and you went from ideally not having to visit this business to going down and visiting how many times a week, probably?
In some weeks, it was a couple of times a week. And oftentimes it was in work clothes.
Right.
To do all of the things that at the time the business couldn't afford to pay to have done. And my other partner and I who showed up, and he's the one with the direct industry experience, we got it done. Right. And it just needed to be done.
And like the car wash analogy, it's when everything in this business was a perfect storm. It really was. From the unfortunate timing to the working operating capital, threshold not being enough to support what was needed to be done. But like in the car wash aspect, what happens if your equipment breaks? Well, I'll just hire somebody to fix it. Well, what happens if you don't have the money to fix it? Because the operating capital was so dwindled from extraordinary circumstances, you were there being a plumber.
That's right.
Right. And these are the things that we really, and I know you feel strongly in this too, we just want people to think about. So part 1 wasn't supposed to be a downing episode. It was supposed to be a critical thinking episode, and I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get into, okay, so our operating partner left,
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually filed bankruptcy,
Mm-hmm.
which she was the personal guarantor of the original loan.
Only guarantor on the
Yes.
loan. Yes.
So then you had to become creative to figure out how to acquire back her ownership
Mm-hmm. From the bankruptcy court.
from the bankruptcy court. All these things sound super fun, by the way, from the bankruptcy court. And then your plan moving forward. So you were on the mission to find a new operating partner, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a transition that happens in a situation like this. And part of the transition is we went from thriving as planned to some bumps in the road to survival. Mm-hmm. And we got back to, let's call it 2.5 years after COVID, we got back to sustainability. Okay. We're starting to accumulate some of our cash reserves. We've got staff in place that are stable. We've got our occupancy level back to a level where it is manageable, not where it needed to be, but it was manageable. And so again, we could, I don't want to say relax too much, but we're not in crisis mode. Mm-hmm. We were literally in crisis mode for a couple of years. And so when we're in this sustainability phase, then as a business owner, I started looking at, okay, what's next? How do we now move the needle to get this back to what we intended and ideally better from being in such a crisis mode? So that's really what happened next. And so I was looking for another operating partner because that's back to one of my fundamental principles in these partnerships. I needed somebody who had direct industry experience, who could be a more effective leader than I could on a regular basis to take us to the next level.
So I want you to kind of explain to me how you did that, because the approach you took was a creative approach. And you can talk about how the interest was bought in at a lower amount because it was more important, and from what I gather from it, to have some skin in the game from these new partners.
Absolutely. And so interrupt me as I go through this, but one of the benefits of a team is that one of our, we'll call him silent partners, who is absentee, had a connection with somebody who was in the industry. And they were interested in buying a facility. And it was actually two couples. One of the couples, the wife of that couple, had experience, very, very successful experience running a business like this, an assisted living facility. The other couple, they own a construction company. And so they were going to team up and wanted to buy an assisted living facility. Now, because of the financial background that we had through this period of crisis, our assisted living facility couldn't be financed. And so what I talked with them about was joining us as partners. And the advantage of them joining us as partners, which we covered in part 1 a little bit, but I want to elaborate on because, again, this is the light at the end of the tunnel and the blessing and at the end. Because I was able to secure our $1.6 million worth of debt with pennies on the dollar in the form of a personal guarantee from me, it wouldn't have been wise for them to buy our facility 100%, because then they would be obligated for 1.6 or whatever the number would be, $1 million worth of debt again. So it made far more sense for them to join us as partners and inject the money that they had available to buy a business with into this business. Mm-hmm. And so these are phenomenal people. I really have come to know and appreciate them, which is, again, part of my process of deciding to partner with somebody. And so what we came up with was I was able to buy the 25% plus interest back through the bankruptcy court at a much smaller number than, well, not as small as I would have liked to have been, honestly, but a number that was manageable. And so my new partners and I came up with a program where I said, listen, I think the fair and reasonable price for 20% ownership in this business is this number. And let's just call it $90,000. And they agreed. But what I proposed was that I would sell them the 20% ownership in the business for $10,000. And that I would ask them to inject, as part of our transaction, roughly call it $80,000 back into the company for remodel purposes. Now, they, as future partners, that's a phenomenal deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's make our asset, or let's get our asset better by injecting our investment money into improving the asset. I mean, that makes perfect sense.
It's really good for everybody. And so, again, being a team player, I wasn't looking to try to sell my interest that I had just paid for as much as possible. I was looking to, how do we make this better for everybody, including my partners? And so from their perspective, if we think this through again, they could try to buy it, obtain financing, and be responsible for $1 million+ in debt, or they can inject, call it $90,000, $80,000 of which is going to go into improving the asset they bought.
Yeah.
And everybody wins. And so that's what we agreed to do. And that was a real win-win for everybody, and has turned out to be the foundation for, I know you're going to continue to walk us through, but the foundation for what's been an amazing partnership with them.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just such smart problem solving. Because it too, to the new partners, it feels like they're contributing in a way that's just not putting money that's going into the business's bank account or what have you, actually kind of brings up like almost a startup idea as well, or like position where they're like, okay, I'm contributing to building this better rather than just coming in and operating the ship. I mean, that was a very creative turn that you took, and I imagine played out pretty well.
Well, it did. And the other thing is that our facility suffered over 2.5, 3 years. Again, we didn't have excess money for things to improve the facility. And so by remodeling the facility, we've actually been able to raise our rates to what's more appropriate for the quality of facility we have now through some of the improvements that were able to be made with the money that they injected into the partnership.
Yeah. So did this release you as being the limited guarantor?
Great question. So no, I am still a limited guarantor, and I'm fine with being a limited guarantor because I feel good about where we are right now. And again, my financial exposure is measured, and I understand it. And I firmly believe now, again, in the industry and the business and the team that are part of this with me.
Right. And that's what we talked about a lot too on great partnerships is, and we'll cover this towards the end, but making sure that you're partnering with the right people is just key.
Yeah. And to that point, I don't want to get ahead of where we're going with this, but the right people in this case, these folks, these two couples came in and immediately started playing a leadership role. And they contributed a lot of their time and energy at no cost to the partnership to improve the facility. Because of their background in the construction industry, they've been able to provide the remodeling at far less than we could have without them. It truly has come back to being a team sport with people that I am so honored to be on the team with.
Yeah, and I want to say too, every time you say leadership and team, that's one of the most important things in business. Is I feel like some people get into business just to be the boss, right? Just to, tell people what to do or what have you, or be the star of the show. And the best people in business are the true leaders, the ones who look at the whole team for everyone's benefit and not necessarily their own. And that's 100% what you did in this situation. And the new partner stepping in to lead, and we'll get into this, but the employees who worked relentlessly through the hardship.
Yeah, I mean, it really is team. And maybe me structuring this the way I did for the benefit of all is part of what inspired them to contribute to the way they did so selflessly. I'm not sure, but I do know that it feels good to be part of a team that you can rely on. And just to fast forward a little bit, the manager, again, the employee who was the manager with us through all of this time of struggle and crisis with COVID, is actually happier now in this dynamic with really what's considered a new boss because of the leadership they're able to provide for her that I couldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. It's, people just want to be a part of a team. And it goes back to the availability to the new operating managers are able to be there more than you were.
Absolutely.
And it makes all the difference.
It does. Well, and they're in the industry.
Right.
So the person who's involved in the day-to-day now has experience running numerous facilities like this, not just one. And so what she brings to the table is crucial to the success we're experiencing now.
That's awesome. And so moving forward, some of the things that you did or that the team did after bringing on the new operating managers is implemented staff and systems and protocols, which has improved. You know, people want to know what they're supposed to do. I'm a huge believer in systems. So implementing new systems, and that's made a huge difference as well.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, and again, I'm not saying employees are like kids, but oftentimes kids need leadership, right? If you're a parent, they want to know what the boundaries are and just simply my new partner bringing in those types of structures again, which is here's how we're going to do it and here's why it's done. It allows everybody to relax a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they now know, they feel safe. They now know where they're going, as opposed to how it had been run with us trying to run it more, but we're still absentee because of our other commitments and obligations.
Right.
It's too much free for all.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about, scaling your business and how to know when your business is ready for scale. And it's like phase 1 is survival, right? And then phase 2 is systems. And then it goes on from there. But people do, and you can correct me if I said that wrong. I know that there's actually like a formula that is used for that. But people like consistency. People like boundaries of what they're supposed to do or not supposed to do, because that creates a comfortable atmosphere where everyone knows that they're following the steps and they're getting the outcome, the recipe, right? That's why we're so big on recipes. The outcome of which, they're supposed to be getting with this recipe.
For sure.
So moving on, you guys remodeled. So tell me about some of the remodeling that you did and just some of the improvements that you did with that cash injection from the new partners.
Yeah, and I want, as I describe this, I'm hoping that people can put themselves in the position of if they worked in this facility, right? They work in a facility that was literally in survival for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden, here comes the new boss, so to speak. And the old bosses are still there, but this new boss, and the new boss is saying, listen, I need to know what you think is important here as an employee of the business. Well, the reality is the furniture, it's out of date. It could be improved. And we've had people who come in for a tour and they notice that this doesn't look right. And I don't want to say overnight, but literally within about 30 days, my new partners acquired all kinds of new furniture, silverware, dishes, supplies. And so from a staff perspective, they were seeing like, wow, not only am I being heard, but there's obviously the money to do what's needed to turn this into the facility that it always had the potential to be, but it was still in survival. So that was a piece of it. And then from a remodel perspective, immediately they started remodeling resident rooms and lightning speed. So literally we'd move a resident out of a room to a different room. Within 4 or 5 days, that room is completely remodeled, new flooring, paint, curtains, window coverings, the whole 9 yards, move them back. And they just went room after room after room after room after room, taking care of those first because that's where our residents live and it's super important. Next was bathrooms. After that's light fixtures in the common area, including all the furniture. And it's just gone on. And the last thing that we're working on now is a full remodel of the kitchen. And again, these people aren't living in the kitchen, but it is an aspect of the facility that shows pride of ownership and efficiency and all of those things. And these changes that they grabbed with both hands and took charge of spoke volumes, not only to our staff and to our residents, but also to the community. The word got around the community very quickly that we've got this person that they knew in the industry as being very successful and a caring person for this type of facility, and that we were investing literally tens of thousands of dollars into the facility to improve what we could offer our residents.
Yeah, and another thing too, just to touch on how well put together of a plan that is improving the facility allowed you to raise the prices of the service, which we know that this business needed to have money coming in to help offset the last few years.
Yeah, it just goes hand in hand, right? I mean, we're providing a better service, so that generally would warrant a higher price, and that's exactly what happened. And to put that into perspective, some of our room rates went up $900 a month to $3,000 a month because of the leadership, the team, the improvements, the facility, the whole package. That is a reasonable price for the service we can now provide, as opposed to what we were struggling to provide in the survival mode.
Right. So here we are now in 2025, and I want to get to what are the lessons that we've learned in this situation. Great. But here we are in 2025. Give me a recap of what this business is now doing.
And when you say now doing, what do you mean?
How is it? So it's past survival mode.
Yes.
Yes. And it is now are we flourishing? Where are we at with it?
Yeah. So great question. I think we're still building, but we are a long way from survival and a long way from sustainability. We're now in refinement. And the remodels have almost all been complete. Our occupancy rates are increasing to the point where we're, let's call it 90% roughly, and approaching 100% at all new rates. And so, yes, from a financial perspective, it's a night and day different from where we were. And so much of that has to do with what we're able to provide to our customers now compared to what we could before.
Well, I mean, from what we heard in part one, that is really refreshing to hear.
It is. And I don't want to diminish the significance, even though I've said it once or twice already.
Right.
It is because of the people that are running the day-to-day and the leadership and what they see and know how to do with their direct industry experience that has got it from where it was to where it is.
I mean, you've said this multiple times over the years that I've known you, that you can do some stuff by yourself. I mean, you can do a lot, but you can do, a little by yourself, but you can do magnificent amounts with a great team.
This is such an example of that.
Yeah.
My partner and I, we are both good people that put our heart and soul into the survival of this business, but it was not in thriving.
Yeah.
And it took these folks and the dedication and experience they have and the time to get it to thriving again.
It's truly a great testimony of that. So I want to go into the lessons of what we learned in this situation. So lesson one, we touched on a little bit earlier in this episode, but pick your partners carefully. You want a team that can confidently and powerfully stand with and beside you.
Absolutely. And I don't know that it requires any more explanation than that, but when you listen to part one and understand the dynamic with the first partner compared to part two with these new folks that have partnered with us and come alongside us, it's really night and day, and the results were almost instantaneous.
Absolutely. Next lesson is there has to be some sort of boots on the ground from an ownership perspective.
In my experience, and again, not everybody's experience, but in my experience, small Main Street businesses, every time that I've had an owner-operator leave and I attempt to manage the business effectively with employee management, it's a challenge. It is a serious, serious challenge without owner-operating managers.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. And it aids to the morale of everything. I know from my personal experience is people want to know that the owner is invested and involved and cares, right, about the team and the business. So boots on the ground, whether it's you're there full-time, part-time, or, you can make it there once a week, twice a week, is so important. And I want to emphasize on this a little bit again, because we do get so much of people thinking that they want to buy a business and that they're just simply never going to be there, or that they can run it remotely. And I think it was Keith in one of our earlier episodes that, he said you can only do so much from behind a phone or behind a computer screen. People want human connection.
I love that, and I think it's so true. And from an investment standpoint, some of the people we're in communication with who are listening to us and inquiring with us, this isn't a multifamily building. This isn't a duplex. When you buy a business, every single day there's operationally something that's new. And it is hard, very hard, to not be actively involved in a business and have it sustainable for a long period of time.
It's truly like having a child. It really is.
Yeah.
And you gotta tend to it sometimes, and you gotta care for it. I mean, you have children, you have to tend to them all the time. But nonetheless, I know from my perspective, having the businesses that my husband and I have, or that and you and I have together, I mean, they do require constant care. Or like look at a garden. If you're not watering your garden, then it's probably not going to grow.
Right.
Right. So, operating capital, you've said this multiple times you've actually been bold enough to say that the number one reason, in your opinion, that businesses fail is because they have a lack of operating capital and a reserve. I actually personally learned this the hard way as well in 2020 with one of my companies, is how quickly that faucet can just turn off.
It's pretty amazing. And the reason that I say that operating capital is, in my opinion, one of the biggest reasons that businesses fail is because when you run out of it, it's typically game over. And if you have the ability to go into debt, you might be able to sustain the game even longer. But that adds a whole nother level of complexity to a business operation that's a challenge.
Right.
And in this situation, and again, if our audience wants to hear more about it, we'll talk about the other business that I am part owner of that struggled through this period of time. But I can tell you that both of these businesses right now have twice as much operating capital as they did prior to COVID.
Yeah, we'll make that 3 because
That's
mine
true.
as well, ours.
Yeah, we did.
I was like, never again.
Yeah.
Never. There was not a more uncomfortable position in business than being in that position where you think, prior to that, everything was working the way it was supposed to. And when that happened and that reality set in, all of a sudden you're like, I've made a mistake. And it was right in front of you. So I agree with you. Operating capital is huge.
Well, and determining the right amount of operating capital is a whole nother episode or a whole nother lesson.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my general stance on that is having more than you think you could ever need. That's what helps me to sleep at night. I don't want to be
I was just
going to
say sleep. The amount that doesn't keep you up at night is what you need.
That's
to
the
have
right
in
amount.
The bank. Yes.
Yep. And it should be evaluated. One of the other businesses I have, literally that operating capital reserve at this point is $600,000. $600,000 sitting for a rainy day, another COVID event, or something, and it's worth having it there because we know we will be able to play the game and finish the game, as opposed to being stressed to the max because the lights got shut out, like happened for so many in COVID.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I've learned so much from you and that I appreciate about the way that you structure your partnerships is so many people run their businesses like their personal checking accounts, right? Like, my business owes me a cup of coffee. Or my business, we're going to just take this vacation on the business. But lacking the knowledge, maybe, to have the system to do exactly what you just said, I'm not taking a distribution or money isn't going out unless we have this much money sitting in the bank account. And again, that was a hard lesson I think a lot of us learned in COVID. But it's such a strong formula.
Yeah, and there's really a few things there. I mean, one is having the education, right, which isn't super complicated. That's fairly
comes with
easy.
Reps. Yeah.
It comes with some reps.
Yeah.
But the discipline to do it is hard for a lot of business owners to be able to do. And it's also one of the things that's beneficially built into partnerships is because when you're in a partnership, you're accountable to others.
Yeah.
And so it's much easier to maintain an operating capital reserve like I've described when it's for the benefit of everybody.
Right.
And so to me, it's just sound business, and I would not want to do it any other way.
I mean, I can say that I made the mistakes too as a young business owner where, we thought we had enough, and this wasn't, the 2020, I was a seasoned business owner by then, but nonetheless, where I learned really quick that, the business doesn't owe you that many cups of coffee. Having that operating capital, and it was such a fine example in this story of how that made a big difference. So communication is key in all things business, partners, lenders, staff, management. It seems like in this business there was a portion where there was just some balls kind of dropped, it sounded like in your lap without a lot of discussion around it.
Yeah, so that's certainly true. But I think, honestly, if there's a lesson that I want to pull from this as one of the tools that I keep in my toolbox when I'm taking hits I'm not comfortable with, the communication is what kept my direct, consistent, and honest communication with our lender is why they were willing to work with us so well through our survival period.
Yeah.
My direct and consistent communication with the manager who was running the day-to-day, and I think we'll cover some of that in the future, That was super important. And when there wasn't clear communication for some reason, we're taking a step back. It's a problem. Communication with my partners about here's what's going on. Here's the reality of the situation. Here's what we could use some help with if anybody's got any ideas. So again, that's what I really want. I hope people will take from this is that it's easy when you're up against the wall to just be quiet or not want to talk about it. To me, the light at the end of the tunnel comes from putting it out there and increasing your communication as opposed to reducing it.
Yeah, and I think some people in hard situations tend to want to retract and hide, under a rock of it's just going to be okay, or this too shall pass. And a lot of times, we have to be productive to stay ahead of it.
100%.
And communication too. Another thing that I've heard you draw an analogy to is sports teams. Communication in baseball teams and football teams, so everyone is working, great as a team. And it is one of the best examples of great communication and how there's a desirable outcome at the end of it.
Yeah, the analogy being, of course, that most of us hear about partnerships that fail or are horrible or there's some big problem, but the reality is partnerships are all around us. And sports teams are a great example of an amazing partnership and team that's able to create a result because of more than one person.
Yeah, and communication and trust in one another and, driving on the road. Right?
Absolutely.
we got to trust that everyone's going to not try to run into us. No, but so that was those were all great lessons. And then I want to kind of circle back to the employee that was running the day-to-day throughout all of this. So kind of lead me into what was the outcome there, and is she still with the business, and how all that looks at this point?
Yeah, great question. And to bring us back, so this is the employee that we promoted when our operating partner resigned and had to leave the state. This is the person that we promoted into that role. And she honestly put her heart and soul into this. I mean, through a survival phase that was probably harder on her than anybody. You might remember that during COVID, there was a period of time where our government in their infinite wisdom was paying people more to stay home than to show up to work. And that created an enormous hardship for all of the businesses that I have an interest in, but also every business owner that I had talked to where we couldn't find help.
Yeah.
And especially in the assisted living facility where you need help 24/7. This woman who was our manager, I mean, she would work 60, 70, 80 hours a week taking care of people because of her dedication to the facility, to us as her bosses and part of her team. And she has her own life to lead. I mean, she has kids and she has a family and all of these things. And she just literally sacrificed over and over and over to keep this facility in place and operating day after day. And if she would have thrown in the towel, we would have been forced to take all of our residents to the emergency room or somewhere else because she held it together.
Wow. I mean, that's just invaluable. And I know you are, and I am as well in my businesses. I'm just so grateful for our teammates that show that type of love. It's one of those things where you think nobody can love my business the way that I do. And when you find a team that truly does love your business and tries as hard, we talk about another thing that kept you afloat was the entrepreneurial spirit and tenacity to keep this thing going. And she by far showed that.
Well, she did. And I guess to bring that story a little bit further, so she had always shared with myself and my other managing partner of the entity that it was always her dream to own an assisted living facility. It makes me emotional because it's a big deal. And so one of the things that happened through this dynamic is when we brought on our new operating partners, if you followed the math, I bought 25% from the bankruptcy court and I sold 20% to the new partners, and that leaves this extra ownership interest. And when the new partners were coming on board, I was telling our employee manager that something big was coming and I was working on it because literally it took months and months to get it to fruition. But I wanted her to know that we were working on something that was beneficial, and I told her how much I thought it would mean to her. And so when we were able to be in a position to announce it as something that was going to happen, I announced to her that what we had done and why we had done it and all the money that was going to be available to improve the facility. But I also told her that I knew it had been her dream to own part of this facility at some point, and that with her cooperation in a transition with these new people, that I was going to gift her an interest in this company, in a period of time. And she literally just started bawling. And this is a woman who, again, had dedicated her life and put her heart into this facility. And there is nobody that deserves ownership any more than she does. And so, again, in about a month, this will all come to fruition, and she will be part owner in the facility with all of these other people that she's sacrificed enormously. And so it warms my heart that that's how this all played out. And to me, that's the light at the end of the tunnel. And it does make me emotional because it's very easy for me to remember looking at the times that she was literally working a double shift, and then would do another one and somehow manage her children in between and her family and all of the things she had to do personally. And she wasn't doing it just because it was her job. She was doing it because she cared about the people in that facility and the business.
Yeah. And it's just, again, I'll say that's just so amazing because the team, again, we can just do great things with the team, and what a team player she is. And now she's going to be an owner of this facility. So what an amazing conclusion to this episode, or this whole story that started out so grim in episode 1, where I'm sure the majority of our listeners, like myself as well, and you had said, plenty of people told you and the lenders, you can throw the towel in. Nobody's going to judge you for this. And look at where you are now, and look at where, she is and the facility is, and just what an amazing conclusion.
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, we never know what's at the end, but I am so grateful that this is the story that I'm able to tell about this facility and the people that are involved with it.
Yeah.
So it's a big story, but one with an amazing ending.
Well, and I want to say something before I let you wrap up this episode, but to our audience, if you guys are more interested, or you are interested in learning how Matt structures these partnerships and the dynamics of it, or have questions about it, please, be interactive in this episode. Leave questions on our social media avenues or on our website. You can go drop questions there, but we would love to hear from you if you're looking to structure a partnership, or if you just have questions in general about what that looks like. Please don't hesitate to ask, or even leave something that you want us to discuss in a future podcast, go deep into the partnerships and the structures.
Yeah, absolutely. And we thank you for joining us. We hope that if you were able to stick through part 1, which was heavy, that you enjoyed part 2, and that, again, you pull every bit of the content here that's built into these stories and these episodes for your future benefit and your future success. See you next time. And that's a wrap on today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and got some valuable insights into the world of buying and selling businesses. Want to be a guest on our show? If you have a deal that you'd like to discuss with us, or a business story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email using the contact information below in the episode notes, and let's make this happen. Never miss an episode. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you found today's episode helpful, please leave us a review. It helps more people like you find the show.